Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, let us learn about the subject database management system. The topic we are going to discuss today is concurrency control in databases, that is, two-phase locking technique for concurrency control. The topics we discuss today is concurrency control in databases, control concurrency, concurrency control technique, two-phase locking. Now, let us learn about concurrency control in databases. Concurrency control concepts comes under the transaction in database management system. It is the procedure in DBMS which helps us for the management of two simultaneous processes to execute without conflicts between each other. These conflicts occur in multi-user systems. Concurrency can simply said to be executing multiple transactions at a time. It is required to increase time efficiency. If many transactions try to access the same data, then inconsistency arises. Concurrency control required to maintain consistency data. For example, if we take ATM machine and do not use concurrency, multiple persons cannot draw money at a time in different places. This is where we need concurrency. Advantages. The advantages of concurrency control. Waiting time will be decreased, response time will be decreased, resource utilization will increase, system performance and efficiency is increased. Now let us learn about control concurrency. The simultaneous execution of transactions over shared databases can create several data integrity and consistency problems. For example, if too many people are logging in the ATM machines, serial updates and synchronization in the bank server should happen whenever the transaction is done. If not, it gives wrong information and wrong data in the database. Main problems in using concurrency are updates will be lost. One transaction does same changes and another transaction delete that change. One transaction nullifies the updates of another transaction. Uncommitted dependency or the T-read problem. On variable has updated in one transaction. At the same time, another transaction has started and deleted the value of the variable that the variable is not getting updated or committed that has been done on the first transaction. This gives us false values or the previous values of the variables. This is a major problem. Inconsistent retrievals. One transaction is updated multiple different variables. Another transaction is in the process to update those variables and the problem occurs in inconsistency of the same variable in different instances. The next one is concurrency control technique. Locking. Lock guarantees exclusive use of data items to a current transaction. It first accesses the data items by acquiring a lock. After completion of the transaction, it releases the lock. Types of lock. The first one is shared lock. Transaction can read only the data item values. It is also known as read-only lock. In a shared lock, the data item can only read by the transaction. It can be shared between the transaction because when the transmission holds a lock, then it can't update the data on the data item. Exclusive lock used for both read and write data item values. In the exclusive lock, the data item can be both reads as well as written by the transaction. This lock is exclusive, and in this lock, multiple transactions do not modify the same data simultaneously. Now let us learn about two-phase locking technique for concurrency control. The two-phase locking protocol divides the execution phase of the transaction into three parts. The first part is when the execution of the transaction starts, it seeks permission for the lock it requires, that is T begin. In the second part, the transaction acquires all the locks, that is lock is attained. The third phase is started as soon as transaction releases its first lock. The third phase is lock is released. In the third phase, the transaction cannot demand any new locks. It only releases the acquired lock. That is the end. There are two phases of two-phase locking, growing phase and shrinking phase. In growing phase, a new lock on the data item may be required by the transaction, but none can be released. In shrinking phase, existing lock held by the transaction may be released, but no new locks can be acquired. In the below example, if lock conversion is allowed, then the following phase can happen. Upgrading of lock from S of A to X of A is allowed in growing phase. Downgrading of lock from X of A to S of A must be done in shrinking phase. Example, there is a table with the 9 steps, 0 to 9 steps. T1 and T2 are the transactions. Now let us see how the transaction appears. The following way shows how unlocking and locking work with two-phase locking. First, transaction T1. Growing phase starts from 1 to 3, that is a locking. A shrinking phase from 5 to 7, that is unlocking. Lock point is at 3. Transaction T2 growing phase is from 2 to 6, that is locking point. Shrinking phase is from step 8 to 9, that is unlocking points. Lock point is at 6. Thank you everyone.